Esther did not enter the palace trying to save a nation. At first, she was simply trying to survive inside it, which already sounded difficult enough, because the Persian palace was one of those places where everything looked luxurious right up until someone powerful became offended and solved the situation with an execution. Massive halls, golden walls, servants everywhere, and underneath all of it, fear dressed like royalty. King Xerxes had recently removed Queen Vashti after a public embarrassment escalated into an empire-wide crisis. One uncomfortable royal moment later, the government somehow decided the solution was a massive beauty competition, which honestly explained a lot about the empire already. Young women were gathered from across Persia, prepared, observed, presented, and somewhere in the middle of all that political theater was Esther, a Jewish girl raised by her older cousin Mordecai, quiet, careful, extremely observant. Because before she entered the palace, Mordecai gave her one instruction that would quietly control her entire future. Do not tell anyone who you are. And suddenly, survival became performance. New environment, new rules, new identity. It was basically getting the opportunity of a lifetime and realizing one wrong sentence could destroy your entire career immediately afterward. The palace rewarded appearance, confidence, charm. Truth was significantly less useful. So Esther adapted quickly. She listened more than she spoke, watched more than she reacted, learned how the palace worked before trusting anyone inside it, which was smart, because Persian politics had the structural stability of a collapsing staircase. One offended official could erase a family, one rumor could end a career, one public mistake could suddenly become national policy. And somehow, Esther navigated all of it well enough to become queen, which sounded impressive, until she realized becoming queen did not actually make her safe. It just made her easier to see. The crown looked powerful from a distance. Up close, it mostly looked exhausting. Royal clothing, magnificent, peace of mind, removed immediately. And that was the real problem hiding underneath Esther's success. The danger did not begin with Haman. It began the moment she understood her survival depended on hiding who she really was. Because now she was balancing two identities at the same time. Public Esther, private Esther. One existed for the empire, the other stayed hidden to stay alive. And eventually that kind of pressure changes the way a person walks into a room. Every conversation becomes calculated, every reaction becomes measured, every silence starts carrying weight. And this is where survival starts looking more like performance. Meanwhile, Mordecai stayed near the palace gates, close enough to hear rumors and watch political movements unfold, which became useful very quickly. At one point, he uncovered an assassination plot against the king. Two officials planned to kill Xerxes. Mordecai overheard them. Esther reported it. The conspiracy was stopped. Problem solved, mostly, because the information was written into the royal records and then quietly forgotten, which would become extremely important later. But for now, Esther remained inside the palace, trying to maintain something dangerously fragile. Safety built on silence. And for a while it worked. Nobody questioned her background, nobody looked too closely, nobody searched for the truth. Then Haman entered the story. And suddenly, silence stopped feeling safe at all. Esther wanted to stay safe. That was still the plan. Remain careful, remain quiet, survive palace politics without attracting unnecessary attention, which already required the emotional endurance of someone diffusing explosives inside a chandelier showroom. But then, Haman arrived. And suddenly the entire empire became dangerous for her personally. Haman rose quickly through the Persian government, promoted above the other officials, trusted by the king, given enormous authority, and almost immediately he started enjoying it a little too much, actually significantly too much. The king ordered royal officials to bow before Haman whenever he appeared. Most people complied, because refusing to bow to powerful men in ancient empires generally reduced life expectancy. But Mordecai refused. No bow, no performance, no panic, just quiet refusal, which irritated Haman far more than it probably should have. Because people like Haman rarely want simple respect. They want visible submission. And once Mordecai's background became known, the situation escalated instantly. Haman did not decide to punish one man. He decided to target an entire people group, which somehow became official government policy frighteningly fast. He approached King Xerxes with a carefully manipulated proposal. A certain people, he explained, followed different laws, different customs, different loyalties. They were inconvenient, disruptive, potentially dangerous. And Xerxes, displaying the decision-making process of a man speedrunning political disaster, approved the decree. Just like that. An empire-wide order was issued to destroy the Jewish people. Men, women, children, all scheduled under official law. Which meant Esther's hidden identity had suddenly transformed from private information into a death sentence waiting for discovery. And this was the terrifying part. The queen herself was now trapped inside the same system, threatening her people. The palace still looked beautiful, still organized, still powerful. But now Esther understood something important. The danger had reached her directly. It was like discovering the company you work for just approved a policy targeting people exactly like you. Same office, same meetings, entirely different level of fear. Meanwhile, Mordecai responded publicly. He tore his clothes, wore sackcloth, mourned openly outside the palace gates, which created a very uncomfortable situation for Esther, because she could no longer pretend the crisis existed somewhere far away. The problem was now standing directly outside her window, wearing grief like a warning sign, and Esther initially hesitated. Not because she did not care, because she understood exactly how dangerous involvement would become. Approaching the king without invitation was forbidden, even for the queen, especially for the queen, honestly. Royal marriage in Persia looked glamorous right up until basic communication started requiring survival calculations. And that was the moment Mordecai sent her the message that changed everything. Do not assume the palace will protect you forever, because if Esther stayed silent, someone else might eventually help the Jewish people another way. But Esther herself, she would not escape the consequences. And suddenly neutrality stopped existing. Some people can hide who they are, right until the system starts looking for them. The palace that once protected Esther now felt unstable beneath her feet, because staying quiet was becoming more dangerous than speaking. And for the first time since entering the palace, Esther understood something clearly. Eventually, she would have to choose between safety and action. And the terrifying part was knowing the decision itself could kill her. By this point, Esther understood the situation clearly. The empire had approved the destruction of her people. Haman controlled the political atmosphere. Mordecai was mourning publicly outside the palace. And meanwhile, she was still expected to walk through royal hallways smiling politely like nothing catastrophic was happening, which honestly felt less like leadership and more like emotional acrobatics. But now the real problem finally arrived. Mordecai wanted Esther to approach the king directly, and that sounded reasonable right up until Persian law entered the conversation, because in Persia, approaching the king without invitation could get a person executed immediately. No discussion. No clarification, no sorry, wrong timing. If the king did not extend the golden scepter, the visitor died, which made spontaneous conversations noticeably less popular. And Esther had another problem. She had not even been called to see Xerxes in 30 days, which was not exactly reassuring. In royal terms, silence could mean many things: busy schedule, political distraction, loss of interest, potential disaster. And suddenly Esther found herself trapped between two terrifying possibilities: speak up and possibly die. Stay silent and possibly survive long enough to watch everyone else die. Not ideal. Meanwhile, Mordecai sent another message, and this time there was no comfort left inside it. Do not assume the palace will save you. If Esther remained silent, help might still come from somewhere else, but she herself would not escape the consequences forever, which completely changed the situation. Because suddenly this was no longer about preserving her position. It was about deciding whether safety was still worth protecting, if it required permanent silence. And that is the uncomfortable thing about fear. At first, it tells people to stay quiet for survival. Eventually, it asks them to live with what their silence allows. Esther finally understood that remaining passive was no longer neutral. It was a decision too. So she gave instructions to Mordecai. Gather the Jewish people. Fast for 3 days, pray, prepare. Because she was going to approach the king, which was still an absolutely terrible plan from a survival perspective. Official strategy, improvise and survive. Backup strategy, none detected. And the irony was impossible to ignore. Esther had reached the highest position in the empire, while still possessing almost no actual security at all. The crown gave visibility, not protection. And for the first time since entering the palace, Esther stopped thinking primarily about survival, not because she suddenly became fearless, because continuing to stand still had become impossible. And this is where courage stops looking dramatic and starts looking necessary. So Esther prepared carefully. Royal clothing, formal presentation, perfect timing. Because if she was going to risk her life, she was at least going to arrive professionally. Then the moment finally came. She entered the inner court uninvited. Every official in the room understood the danger immediately. One wrong reaction from Xerxes and the queen herself could die in front of the entire palace. And honestly, Persian royal meetings already had enough tension without adding possible executions to the schedule. For a moment, everything stopped. The king looked at Esther. The court waited. And then Xerxes extended the golden scepter, which meant Esther remained alive. A very encouraging development for everybody involved. But Esther was not finished, because surviving the entrance was only the beginning. The real confrontation had not even started yet. And the dinner invitation she offered next? That was not the solution. It was the start of the trap. At this point, Haman believed everything was going perfectly, which, historically speaking, is usually the exact moment things begin collapsing. He had power, influence, direct access to the king. An empire-wide decree had already been approved. His enemies appeared helpless, and now somehow Queen Esther herself had invited him to a private royal banquet, just him and the king, which inflated his ego to catastrophic levels almost immediately. Haman left the palace feeling unstoppable, the kind of confidence usually seen in people who mistake temporary success for permanent security. And honestly, he was enjoying himself far too much. He bragged constantly, talked about his status, listed his accomplishments, repeatedly mentioned how important he was, which is generally a bad sign in any century. But one thing still bothered him: Mordecai. Every time Haman passed through the palace gates, Mordecai still refused to bow. No fear, no performance, no respect, just the same calm refusal. And somehow that irritated Haman more than all his power satisfied him. Because arrogance has a strange weakness. It still needs validation. So instead of ignoring Mordecai like a stable adult with unlimited political authority probably should have done, Haman escalated everything again. He went home furious, complained to his family, complained to his friends, listed all his achievements for emotional support. And somehow the conversation ended with this solution: build a giant execution pole and ask the king to kill Mordecai publicly, which everyone around him apparently considered reasonable. So Haman prepared the structure immediately. Massive, visible, impossible to miss. The kind of thing designed less for justice and more for theatrical intimidation. And the irony quietly started building right there, because the man preparing the execution did not realize he was constructing the symbol of his own downfall. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened inside the palace. That night, King Xerxes could not sleep, which sounds insignificant. Until you remember, entire empires sometimes change direction because one powerful man has insomnia. So Xerxes ordered the royal records to be read aloud to him. And eventually they reached the forgotten story about Mordecai uncovering the assassination plot against the king. The king suddenly realized something important. Mordecai had saved his life and never received any reward, which immediately created a problem. Because Persian kings enjoyed appearing extremely generous, right after realizing they forgot something politically important. So early the next morning, Xerxes asked a convenient question to the first official entering the court. Unfortunately for Haman, that official was Haman. The king asked, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" And Haman made one critical mistake. He assumed the question was about himself, which honestly explained almost every problem he was having already. So Haman described an elaborate public celebration, royal clothing, royal horse, public recognition, official praise, essentially a full empire-wide parade announcing, "Please admire this important man immediately." And Xerxes listened carefully, then gave the worst possible response Haman could have imagined. "Excellent idea. Now go do all of that for Mordecai." And suddenly the most powerful man in Persia found himself publicly honoring the exact person he wanted executed, which was already humiliating enough. But the collapse had only started, because pride accelerates fastest when nobody interrupts it. And now Esther's banquet was approaching. The room was ready. The king was waiting. Haman still believed he controlled the situation. He did not realize the truth was already walking toward the table. By the time Haman arrived at Esther's second banquet, he still believed he was walking into another honor, which was understandable. Wrong, but understandable. He had been invited by the queen. He was sitting with the king. The setting looked private, royal, and extremely favorable. Unfortunately for Haman, the room was not built for celebration. It was built for exposure. Xerxes asked Esther again what she wanted, half the kingdom if necessary. A generous offer. Also a slightly dramatic customer service policy, but that was very on brand for Persian royalty. And then Esther finally spoke plainly. Her people had been sold for destruction, not insulted, not inconvenienced, not politically pressured, destroyed, and she was one of them. Suddenly the entire room changed. The queen was not asking for decoration, she was asking for survival. The crisis was no longer hidden inside paperwork. It was sitting at the table. And Xerxes immediately wanted to know who had done this, which was a dangerous question for anyone currently sweating near a banquet plate. Esther answered directly. The enemy was Haman. And just like that, the man who thought he controlled the story became the villain inside it. Haman panicked. Xerxes was furious. Esther stayed composed. The room collapsed around one man's arrogance. A few minutes earlier, Haman had status, access, influence. Now he had none of those things. Very inconvenient transition. The king left the room in anger, probably needing a moment to process the fact that his own signature had helped authorize disaster, which, to be fair, was not his best administrative moment. Haman, now fully aware that his career had entered its final chapter, begged Esther for his life. And somehow, even that went badly. When Xerxes returned, he misunderstood the scene and became even angrier. At this point, Haman's reputation was falling so fast it probably needed its own soundtrack. Then one of the officials mentioned the giant execution pole Haman had prepared for Mordecai. The same Mordecai who had saved the king's life. The timing was spectacularly terrible for Haman. The king gave the order, and Haman was executed on the very structure he had built for someone else. The plan had reversed completely. The trap became evidence. The weapon became judgment. The arrogance became the ending. Haman's ego cancelled. His decree, however, was more complicated, because Persian law could not simply be erased once sealed by the king, which is the kind of legal system that really commits to bad decisions. So a new decree had to be written. The Jewish people were allowed to defend themselves. Mordecai was elevated. Esther's risk created a path for survival across the empire. The story did not end because Esther had military power. She did not command an army. She did not control the empire. She did not begin with public authority. She began hidden, careful, silent, vulnerable. But when silence became easier than courage, she chose the harder thing. And that choice changed everything. The palace that once looked like protection had also been the place where she could have died. That was the tension from the beginning. Safety was never guaranteed. The crown never made her untouchable. The room that could have ended her life became the room where she saved her people. And that is what makes Esther's story so powerful. She did not save a kingdom because she had complete control. She saved it because she risked everything when staying silent would have been much easier.